This field looks so peaceful. Hard to imagine it was once the killing grounds for one of the most famous battles in history. This is Waterloo. On June 18, 1815, the greatest general of his day, many say the greatest general ever, risked it all. He was Napoleon Bonaparte. His military genius and political savvy enabled him to not only become the ruler of France, but an emperor who controlled most of Europe. He had been riding high until he decided to invade Russia. Big mistake. And he did it in winter. Even bigger mistake. Rather than surrendering, the Russian generals decided to burn their own farmlands, as well as their capital city, Moscow, depriving Napoleon food and supplies for his troops. Napoleon was forced to retreat. Bitter cold and starvation killed more French than did Russian bullets. The invasion of Russia had started with an army of 600,000. Incredibly, only 30,000 returned to France. Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was sent into exile on the island of Elba. But he escaped. Unlike this picture, there were no crowds. He quietly boarded a ship and snuck back into France with a handful of followers. An army was sent to stop him, but instead, they joined him. He marched into Paris and declared himself emperor again. Furious, England, Prussia, the Netherlands, and a few other allies agreed to mobilize. Napoleon knew his only chance of defeating these powerful adversaries depended on two things. He couldn't wait for them to attack. He'd have to attack them. And he needed to do it before the Allies could join forces. And that's what brought Napoleon and his army to this field in Belgium. We'll continue our story on the battle that changed history when Teen Kids News continues. Welcome to the Waterloo Battlefield Museum. The museum is crammed with fascinating exhibits, from coming face to face with a guillotine to seeing the faces of many of those who had a role to play during what historians call the Napoleonic era. There are pictures that seem to bring the history alive. Kinda looks like the moving paintings in Harry Potter, doesn't it? Glass cases contain the weapons of early 19th century warfare. Flintlock rifles, pistols, and sabers, as well as life-size models of the men who wielded them. On this side are the French. Over here are the Allies. This scene shows a French conference of war just before the battle. Surprisingly, Napoleon is sitting quietly off to the side. Usually, Napoleon is portrayed in far more heroic style. You'll also meet the two generals determined to crush Napoleon once and for all, England's Duke of Wellington and Prussia's Field Marshal Blücher. Fortunately for Napoleon, Wellington's army and Blücher's army hadn't linked up yet. Wellington's soldiers were already at Waterloo, but they desperately needed Blücher to join them. So Napoleon's plan was to fight the British first and defeat them, then turn and face the smaller Prussian army. To get an idea of the scope of the battle, we need to go to another building. This building. And it's round for a reason. Inside is a breathtaking artist's conception of what the Battle of Waterloo might have looked like. The immense painting runs along the wall of the entire building. So with all that in mind, let's go to a place where you can get a unique view of the battlefield. This is the Lion Mound. It's a man-made hill 14 stories high. You can walk up the 226 steps, or you can try to run. Let's go. Some celebrate when they reach the top. The views from up here are truly awesome. The French were arrayed in this direction, and the British were over here. The Prussians still hadn't arrived. Wellington had a crucial decision to make: stay and fight, hoping Blücher will arrive on time, or turn and flee. Blücher had promised he'd come, and Wellington was about to wager everything on that promise. The battle began in the late morning. After repeated attacks and counterattacks, by mid-afternoon, the British were being hard-pressed. It looked like the French were gonna win. And then, Blücher and his Prussians arrived, turning the tide of battle. In desperation, Napoleon finally sends in his most trusted soldiers, the Old Guard. They had never been defeated, but they were today. There's a famous story that when a British officer asked the Old Guard to surrender, their general replied,
La garde meurt, mais ne se rend pas.
The guard dies but does not surrender. Seeing that all was lost, Napoleon fled to Paris, where he again was forced to abdicate. This time, he was sent even farther away, and he died on the lonely island, St. Helena. Though most military experts agree that Blücher saved Wellington's bacon, it's Wellington who became the famous hero of the Battle of Waterloo. There are 39 places around the world named Wellington, including 20 in the United States. Footwear was named after him. These are Wellington boots. And you can probably guess the name of this tasty dish, beef Wellington. The battle is so famous, the word Waterloo is now used to refer to anyone's major defeat. As in, failing that history test was my Waterloo. Guess I should have watched more Teen Kids News. With a bit of Belgium, I'm Emily.